Dr. N. Srikumar is Associate Professor of Philosophy in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Madras. He specializes in hermeneutics, bioethics, and Indian philosophy, and also explores phenomenological, medical, and philosophical conceptions of well being and the various aspects related to them. He offers courses in European and Indian philosophies, Gandhian philosophy, and ethics. A gold medalist in post graduation, Dr. Srikumar did his Ph.D. from the Central University of Hyderabad after completing MPhil from the same institution. Before joining IIT Madras in 2003, he worked in BITS Pilani. He is an associate of the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla. Dr. Srikumar is member in many academic bodies and associations. Apart from academic publications, he also writes in many English and Malayalam periodicals and magazines.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series on biomedical ethics. We are going to see some of the important issues which we face in India today with regard to this whole idea of biomedical ethics. Topics which we are going to discuss today are: what is ethics, what is biomedical ethics, which I call BME, and why biomedical ethics, the importance of biomedical ethics. Then we will see the history of biomedical ethics, ancient, modern, and contemporary approaches. That will be seen in the contemporary approaches will be seen in subsequent lectures. In today's lecture, we will concentrate on the two approaches by Charaga and Sushruta, the ancient Indian physicians, and also the Chinese approach, the ancient Chinese approach towards biomedical ethics. So, we will begin with certain facts about what is happening in India today, right now. See, there are certain facts which are really shocking. For instance, more than 200 people died between January and June 2012 due to serious adverse events during clinical trials. All of us know that clinical trials take place in various parts of the world and also in India, where apart from animal experimentations or after that, human beings are actually involved. And when it takes place in places like India, developing countries, there are several factors we need to keep in mind, and there are several potential dangers. So, these incidents actually point to such potential dangers, how people can be exploited. And in 2011, 438 cases of SAE were reported, of which 16 were found to be due to clinical trials. And again 2010, 668 cases were reported, of which 22 were caused due to the trials. And again, if you go further, a trial administered in conjunction with the state government led by a US based NGO, PATH, recruited hundreds of tribal girls without parental consent. So, this is another major issue, consent, for example. Subsequently, we will explain what, or we will try to understand what this concept of consent is. It is a very important concept in today's world, particularly in the context of medical practice and medical research in India. But this, and it refers to a fundamental human rights. Before a particular medicine is administered or an experiment is conducted, consent needs to be taken from the concerned people. That is not done in this particular case. So, it is a blatant violation of human rights. Again, the Regional Cancer Institute, some time back it has happened, the Regional Cancer Institute in Trivandrum, which is actually a reputed organization which was in the news for bad reasons, because they conducted certain trials without proper consent from the patients. So, patients were given the impression that they were treated, but instead of administering medicine for their illness, they were actually being part of an experiment without their knowledge, without their consent. This is again a violation of fundamental rights. And doctors at a government hospital in Indore conducted several private trials that violated the ethical guidelines. So, such things are quite common in developing countries and also in India, which is actually a shocking realization for us in the 21st century. And there are certain other issues as well which rather attract our attention. Say for instance, a couple of years back, or rather last year, in fact it was in 2012, the death of Dr. Savita Halapnava on October 28, 2012 at University Hospital in Galway in Ireland. This incident took place when she was actually, doctors advise ideally we could have served, the doctors could have saved her life had an abortion was done, but due to certain religious factors, because Ireland is a predominant Catholic country, and Catholicism as a religion is against abortion. So, they were hesitant to go for an abortion, which ultimately resulted in the death of this Indian doctor, which actually called for a review of the abortion laws in Ireland. This has been widely discussed all over the world as a typical case which actually brings out the conflict between traditional values and modern requirements, modern life rather, we can put it in that way, because modern life actually puts us in situations where we employ technology for our welfare, and this might actually lead to certain conflicts with certain traditional values. And the Aruna incident in Mumbai 2 years back, which again was widely discussed. There were debates about euthanasia in India, and it was for the first time probably very active debates about euthanasia. What is active euthanasia, passive euthanasia, all kinds of things, with all these details were discussed by the Indian media in this context. So, the contemporary life actually brings in or introduces several such concerns, several such ethical dilemmas in modern life. So, in this context, let us now try to understand, let us now approach our topic, today's topic, biomedical ethics in India, or I would rather put it in this way, it is medical ethics in India. I would rather don't mind removing that bio part of it, because we are concentrating more on medical ethics or ethical issues which are relevant to the practice of medicine, modern medicine particularly in India today. And this will give you an outline of the topics which we are going to discuss today. We will see what is ethics very briefly, what is biomedical ethics, BME, and why biomedical ethics. Then we will go to the history of biomedical ethics. We will have a brief look of the ancient, modern and contemporary approaches to the various ethical issues, and how these societies, ancient, modern and contemporary societies, have actually viewed this problem, the problems related to medical practice. In every society this is a concern. You can see that ancient Indian society, Chinese society, Europe, everywhere, in Egypt, everywhere this was a major concern. Civilization actually needs the support of medical science or science of medicine, and it's very essential that the practice of medicine is observed with all care and with the observance of ethical codes. Now, we will again see some of the major ethical issues the practice of medicine faces today's world. Again, the different ethical approaches and frameworks will be analyzed, and now then we will conclude with biomedical ethics in India, highlighting some challenges and what we have to do, reflecting upon, very briefly reflecting upon what we have to do to overcome some of these issues, some of these challenges. Now, as I said, we will have a very brief look at what is ethics and what is biomedical ethics. Ethics as such deals with the norms and principles that suggest how to behave and act in society. So, there are several definitions of ethics. I am not entering into those details here, just to understand that ethics as a discipline, it's usually traditionally it is called it's called as a normative science, which deals with certain norms. The norms that would monitor, that would regulate the practices of or the behavior or the actions of people in a society is what ethics does. And again, it is often cultural specific, because different culture will have different ethical codes. This is quite obvious, like the way in which what is right and what is wrong for us in Indian society is different from what probably a German or an American would think. So, there are cultural differences, but what is more important is to note that apart from In spite of all those differences, there are certain domains, there are certain areas where we can all agree universally. May change from time to time. This is again another very important thing we have to keep in mind, because the norms which were relevant, the norms which were considered as valid, say 1000 years back, are no more valid today. So we have been changing, and this is very important, this is very relevant when we try to understand the evolution of biomedical ethics in India. Now, when we come to biomedical ethics, it deals with the ethical evaluation of the practicing of modern medicine. So this is what I am using the word biomedical ethics in this sense, and I am concerned only about modern medicine, the practice of modern medicine, which all of us know is a very complex process, which involves a lot of technology, lot of knowledge, and every day, almost every day, this knowledge is being updated. New technologies are introduced and new ways are invented to tackle certain problems. So it's a kind of world, it's a kind of domain which requires what very constantly people have to keep their knowledge updated, and one has to be extremely careful, because one is dealing with life, the life of people, and the ultimate objective, it is being believed, of the science of medicine is well-being and welfare and happiness of people. So all these things together would make the domain of practice of medicine extremely complex in a modern world. And the objective is well-being of the patient and the society. This is the case with all traditions, irrespective of their place of origin. Now, why is biomedical ethics important? Because, as I already mentioned, clinical practice today is a complex process with new technologies, new possibilities, new risk factors, etc. See, 1000 years back, things were totally different, or even 10 years back, things were different. Certain new drugs have been developed, or new technologies have developed to tackle extremely complicated health problems. So all these new inventions and discoveries are drastically changing the way we live in this world. So that's very important for us to understand. And again, new technological contexts are introducing new problems and posing new challenges. I'll give an example. In today, you can actually put a patient in ventilator, and theoretically he or she would be alive till the ventilator is removed, or till some point of time where doctors can keep the life. In all theoretical sense, the heart will be pumping, and all those things will be showing, but the patient is unconscious. But still, we can use a technological device to keep life in the patient. Now, when to remove this plug? That's a question. So this was a problem which never existed, or which our predecessors never faced. This is something which we face in the modern world. So the new technological context in that sense are introducing extremely complicated new problems. See, for example, abortion. Abortion is another kind of, there are several technologies used for abortion, which is again causing complex ethical challenges for the modern man. Now, policies are rapidly changing, which add to the complexities. Government policies, the policies of drug manufacturers and pharmaceutical firms, particularly of governments, this is very rapidly changing. So this also add to the complexities of the situation. And then again, there is, whether we like it or not, a conflict of interest between different stakeholders, which are the stakeholders are patients, physicians, other healthcare professionals, hospital management, insurance providers, government, etc. Often this happens. Like, for example, the hospital which functions like a corporate organization might have invested a lot of money for establishing the infrastructure, the new machinery and other things. Naturally, it has to get back its money from the patients. So it's quite natural that hospitals might start functioning like corporate organization with a motive of profit maximization. And naturally, in this kind of a bargain, each stakeholder will have a role. There are managers, there is management, managers, doctors, nurses, and of course patients and government. Each of these stakeholders will have a role to play, but then naturally everyone would try to protect their interest. The interest of the patient is to to regain health, well-being, and then also he or she is interested to ensure that he or she is not being exploited by the hospital authorities. But naturally the hospital authorities will have to make a lot of money from for profit maximization. They would push that their physicians and other healthcare workers in the organization to sort of negotiate with the patients in several ways, which include unethical ways. So these are causing a lot of complex ethical challenges in today's world. Again, institutionalization of medicine and healthcare, which is actually what I mentioned in the previous point when I discussed about the commercialization of medicine, or hospitals started functioning like commercial organization or industrial organization with the motive of making profit. Then again, commercialization of healthcare, medicalization of man. This is another very complex philosophical, theoretical as well as practical problem, where man, human body, is medicalized. So there are other aspects of human life which is neglected. Rather, the body is being treated as a machine, as an object with certain properties which is examined, and certain strategies were adopted to rectify, or if I am allowed to use the word, quote unquote, repair the body just like you repair a machine. So medicalization of man is again a civilizational problem which modern man faces today. Again, there are very serious cultural issues, like there are conflicting values, because as you know, modern medicine is a global enterprise today. It is not confined to one civilization, though it has originated in the Western world. It is now almost every country in the world, every culture in the world has to forced to adopt modern medicine and modern medical practices. And naturally, modern medicine is always it functions through its infrastructure, which includes hospitals and other paraphernalia, other health workers and various other things, various new technologies. So naturally, in different cultures, these practices might be received in different ways. So that's very important. And again, these practices might introduce certain conflicts in certain cultures, which it might not encounter in certain other cultures. Okay, so these are what I mean by cultural issues, which is very important as far as India is concerned. With this, let us have a short break now, and we'll continue the lecture after the break. Welcome back after the break. Today, there is a lot of emphasis on human rights. 25 years back, it was not so. But today, the society is increasingly being concerned about human rights. Violation of human rights has been a major issue today. And almost every day, if you see the newspaper, you can find people writing a lot about this violation of human rights. And one domain in which such violations can happen is the domain of medical practice. So with more awareness on human rights, the kind of demand for ethical practices in medicine was also very high. Against paternalism in all fields of society, this is another one. Society is moving towards, human societies, many human societies are moving, increasingly moving towards a non-paternalistic paradigm. But in traditional societies, for example, medicine has been always a kind of a practice where the physician was treated as almost equivalent to God, and who is also considered as the final authority on your health issues, and what medicine you are going to take and what kind of well-being you are going to have. But today's modern society demands that individuals, even the layman, every patient has a very important role to play in deciding what his or her conception of well-being is. And it is very important that the physicians and other healthcare professionals and institutions should respect individuals' views about or individuals' perspectives about what is well-being and what is welfare and what is health. Again, there is demand for wider social control of science and research, because science and research, there is a concern that scientific research in all domains is an expert domain. So, these expert domains are far removed from what is, or rather there is a kind of unconnectedness felt by the society, that they are far away from the general concerns of the society, or to put it in other words, the general ethical or moral concerns of the society. These expert domains are blind to them. They are not interested to listen. They consider them as irrelevant. But society now have started, many societies have started asserting their right. They would argue that there should be more and more social control of science or scientific research in every society. And rise of feminism, which actually is a very important point, which opposes the paternalistic approach in all fields, including medicine. Legalization and litigation. Litigation is another process through which the public can actually interfere. The public can actually assert its rights and demand justice from expert domains like medicine. So, a lot of litigations in the court now, a lot of cases have been filed in the court of law by patients and other stakeholders against hospitals and physicians. Cost of medicine. This is again another very important area of concern, because we can see that the pharmaceutical firms, the cost of medicine is going up every day, almost every day. And the pharmaceutical firms, as all of us know, they are corporate organizations. Their prime motive is to make profit. There is nothing wrong about it. They have to make profit to support their research. But in the name of research, some drugs and some medicines are exorbitantly priced, so that the people who actually need them are unable to afford. They cannot buy it. And so there is a conflict between the cost of medicine, which is as the result of the right of corporate pharmaceutical firms, versus the public interest, the interest of the people. And this is actually reflected also genuine medical demands versus market demand. This can be explained by citing an example. There is a lot of demand for medicine for AIDS in third world countries, particularly in Africa, Latin America and Asian countries. And the drug manufacturers, pharmaceutical firms are not that keen to produce or sponsor research in this area, because since the demand comes from these countries, these developing countries or underdeveloped countries, they would fail to find a market in these countries, because they won't be able to sell their medicine at high prices. So, they are not interested to invest in research on certain genuine medical demands that exist in certain human societies. Instead, you will find a lot of medicines or a lot of research taking place in the area of say for example, cholesterol control, which is actually not a problem in some of these countries, developing countries, but which is a major issue for the health for the developed countries. So, there is a market for that. The Americans will buy it. So, there is a market for that. So, invest more money on that, so that your return will be also consequently more. Now, we will move to the next part of our discussion today, the history of biomedical ethics, because as I mentioned in the beginning, this was a major concern. Health or ethical practices in in medicine, in the practice of medicine, has been a concern for all societies, for all civilizations, for all cultures since time immemorial. And we could see that different cultures or different civilizations have developed their own conceptions of health, their own conceptions of the practices of medicine, and also corresponding to this, their own conceptions of ethical values and virtues. So, let us begin with India, the two great masters of Indian science of medicine, Charaka, who was a physician, and Sushruta, who was a surgeon. So, these two people in their Samhitas, in their great works, treatises on health and medicine, they reflect upon a lot on ethical issues. Say for example, when they talk about the qualities of physicians, they should be noble by nature, devoted to truth, courageous and compassionate. Compassionate is underlined in one sense, because that is very important for these people. Then excellent character. A physician must be a person who possesses excellent character, pure in behavior and liberal mind, self-control, seeking the good of all creatures. So, reflecting, I mean they free from haughtiness, then pride, wrath, cupidity and sloth. So, they in one sense we can see that there is a lot of agreement between these concerns or these ethical values and the general ethical values which the Indian philosophical, spiritual and religious traditions project. So, in one sense you can see that these medical practices were not actually separated from the practice of from religious practices that existed in ancient Indian society during those days. So, there was a conception of a whole, the whole of society with several practices. I mean medicine is only one of them, but all these domains in a society would ultimately reflect the general moral concerns of the society. So, it was though these domains involve expertise and certain practices which common man cannot actually venture into, but still when it comes to ethics, the principles are universal and general. Again, they talk about the duties of physicians, that physicians should treat patients gratuitously as if they are his own friends, and seek the good of all living creatures, speak words that are soft, unstained by impurity, full of righteousness, incapable of giving pain to others, truthful, beneficial and properly weighed and measured. He should give up lust, anger, avarice, folly, vanity, pride, envy, rudeness, deception, falsehood, idleness and all other reprehensible conduct. So, this is what it underlines what I said just before this, that there is a lot of consensus among the society that the ethical values and principles which physicians need to practice should correspond to the kind of ethical concerns or moral ethical assumptions generally upheld by the society. So, there is no clear cut distinction, or religion and science were not in watertight compartments as it is in modern world. Now, again, you should not even imagine know another man's wife. This is again talking about the practices. You should not appropriate other people's possession. Do not devote your words, mind, understanding and senses on anything else than what is calculated to do good to the patient or to any other object connected with the patient than his recovery. So, all these underline the importance of the patient being a person with exemplary moral character. Again, he who practices medicine out of compassion for all creatures rather than for gain or for gratification of the senses surpasses all. No benefactor, moral or material, compares to the physician who, by serving the news of death in the form of years diseases, brings back to life those being dragged towards death's abode, because there is no other gift greater than the gift of life. I repeat the last sentence, there is no other gift greater than the gift of life. So, that is being glorified, and the person who does this, the physician, needs to be a person who is very close to what? An exemplary moral character. Now, again this is the situation is not very different in other civilizations, particularly in China and even in Europe, Greek medicine, where Hippocrates is treated as a father of Western medicine. So, in China you can see that due to the domination of Confucianism in their culture, medicine emphasizes on caring about patients. So, care has been given a lot of importance. Physicians need to cultivate virtues, and again a tradition inspired by Confucianism which emphasizes benevolence and universal love. So, these are again, in one sense we can see that there are a lot of similarities between the ancient Indian conception and the ancient Chinese conception, because the character of the physician is again emphasized here. One has to be good, benevolent and love, a person who can love, who has universal love in him. Only such a person can be a physician. So, the criteria is very hard, as we can see it from the context of modern life, and respect for patients. Now, let us summarize today this lecture. We have discussed certain very important points with some introduction, and again some cases we have presented, some contemporary examples we have cited, and also we have gone back a little bit into the history of, to trace the evolution of bioethics. So, the topics which we have discussed is the need for biomedical ethics today, after discussing what is ethics and all that. What is ethics and what is biomedical ethics? The history of medical ethics is something which we have examined today, where we have had some discussion on the Indian tradition, the Charaka and Sushruta Samhitas, which contain a lot of insights about medical ethics. And also we have seen the Chinese view in this lecture. And before we wind up, let us say some questions. Number 1, what factors make biomedical ethics important today? Number 2, what are the important aspects stressed by ancient Indian physicians? And number 3, what is a major concern of ancient Chinese medical ethics? With this, we will wind up this episode. Thank you.